Welcome back to episode 3 of Quest Bonanza. I'm Mike the Map Maker, and as always, I'm going to randomly generate us a battle map and an encounter to go with it that you can download and use at your table straight after the video. What do we have in store for this week? Well, let's go to the cards and find out. I'll bring in my magic tarot box. Very good, beautiful. I've got a special new dice today that I'm going to use. A die. We'll give it a shuka. And we've rolled a 4. We've rolled a number 4, which according to my chart, that's a forest. So yeah, we're going in a forest. I guess the green lighting is nice. It matches up. I'm going to give the tarot deck a shuffle, distribute it into 6 piles, and we'll roll to see which pile I'm going to draw from. Number 1. I'm going to draw from pile number 1. So let's get rid of all the rest and take a look at what we've got. It's the plants. We've got a forest with plants. And in the green light, I can barely see it. And the green light kind of synergizes with it. Absolutely bonkers. Forest and plants. What can we do with that? Well, before we get to that, let's take a look at what your tarot says today. The key words are productivity and snare. Now, I know you've been working hard this week. How about you give yourself a reward so you don't get bogged down? Maybe try something new this next coming week, huh? So I just checked the settings on my iPhone. I think I've accidentally put it into cinematic mode, which is why the behind me is all out of focus and I look so dramatic. It looked kind of good on my phone, so I guess this episode's going to be a test of this feature. Hopefully it looks good when I finally put it together, but yeah, if it doesn't, well, that's why. So I've had a little think, and here's what I've come up with. After a day of hard travel, our adventurers are relieved to set up camp in a safe part of the woods. The sun dips down, and a hot summer's day comes to an end. You hear a babbling brook nearby, and the sentry we've left to guard the camp while everyone else slumbers takes a deep yawn. Things are peaceful. That's about to change. Suddenly, one by one, our heroes are grabbed by long, ligneous tendrils that wrap around them, grab them, and they yank them out of their bedrolls. They are immediately awakened, only to find themselves getting dragged deep into the forest. They desperately scramble to try and stop themselves, to no avail. Worse even, they see in the bushes nearby shadowy figures moving. At the cries of their fellow party members, the guard jolts awake from a light slumber. They're being attacked. This forest harbors a nightmare. What type of nightmare? Well, let's go to the map making to see what we can come up with. So this is our first forest map in Quest Bonanza. I'm really excited to crack on with it, but it is actually a bit daunting to me. A forest is quite abstract when you really think about all the elements coming together. It's abstract and complex because you have a quite simple battlefield, but there's lots of things actually going on in the background. There's lots of plants and shrubs and foliage and all that stuff. Foliage, not foliage. So while it starts off quite simple, you have to build it up. You have to stack things on top of each other. The textures then followed by a bunch of nature stamps. So I've mapped out the basics of where everything's arranged. I've got the river and I've got lots of rocks at the top as well as some elevation to the right. Now I'm going through and I'm adding lots of tree stumps. And talking about stacking, I think the first thing you want to do is start with a good base layer texture. Texture that's really nice and soily, and then you're going to start to add things on top. So I'm adding grass with all these pine needles that have fallen down. Looks very natural. Now I'm going to add little crossings in this brook, this little mini river, where our players can go across without having to be slowed down by the difficult terrain of the water. I'm trying to mix up the rocks, give it that natural look. And I've done this by changing the textures, saturation, and the hue. So on the right, it starts very grimy, full of moss, and then as it goes to the left, it gets drier, and there's less moss. That's what I'm trying to replicate with the change of colour. Now I'm going to add the path. I'm going to do this by cutting through the grass texture with a bunch of different types of dirt texture. And on top, I'm going to give it a lovely, dry, cracked look. I think that looks great. Now in the top left, I'm going to make a slightly more evil area. I'm going to add some evil looking shrubbery, thorns and vines. Wonder what's going on there. I'm going to get distracted. I'm going to try something new and use the line tool to create sort of a grassy edge around these patches of grass. I think it looks quite good on the elevation, but not so much on the ground textures, so I actually get rid of them immediately. Next up, I'm going to add a bunch of trees to the top of the trunks, and I'm going to go back to the evil zone, I'm going to make this kind of weird little hole. Now, I was experimenting with the textures in there, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. I went for this kind of red rock flesh look. It's like the soil has a flesh wound. I think it looks very spooky and weird. Then I changed the elevation texture, because as I'm working on the map, I noticed the grass is vastly different on the top than it is on the ground floor. And so it kind of bugged me, so I decided to change that, make them a bit more uniform. Now I'm decorating the river and the little pond we have here, adding lots of shrubbery and wildlife to it. Again, it's all about that complexity, adding all sorts of textures on top of each other, and then adding the stamps as a little icing on the top. And with the river, what I've done is I've gone around the edges with a transparent water area to make it look like the water is actually coming up above the edge of the soil. Now, one thing Incarnate doesn't do that I'd really wish it did is for these edges, I'm actually cutting the background layer off with the foreground layer, and so that's what that jagged line is, and there's no way to blend it to make it transparent. I think you could do it if you use the background, foreground, and the top layer all together, but I find using stuff on the top layer gets really messy, because when you draw on the top layer with the textures, it'll go on top of the stamps beneath. So I've added all these lovely plants. I don't want it to look a bit weird with all the water and everything. So that's something hopefully I'm going to work on in the future and see if I can figure out a better solution to that, because I do like the way the river looks, but that edge is just a bit too sharp for me, and I wish there was a way to just bring the opacity down on the edges, have a nice little gradient into nothing. Now I am working on probably the most challenging part of the map for me, the thing I struggled with the most, the actual lighting to make it feel like a forest. So I've got the trees here, and of course when the trees are out it looks lovely, but you can't see anything of what's going on underneath. And so I'm trying different ways of just adding light all over the place as if it's a really bright sunny day, but there's also the light under the trees, and then I'm going to get rid of all the treetops and see how that looks. And I find the few things I try to do actually don't look very good, so I have to keep going back to it. I get frustrated and I take a break and I start to work on the camp, adding all sorts of details and stamps to make it feel very cozy, a place where adventurers have set up and are now going to rest the night, and they're safe here. But of course we know they're not safe, because the night time comes around. I'm going to add all the special lighting stamps and start to add lighting to the camp again, making it super cozy. But we're going to have to figure out a way to sort these trees out eventually, Mike. Can't keep ignoring it forever. We'll come back to that though, because I'm still going to keep ignoring it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to add some unusual lighting to the map, because I like the light in the middle, but it being a forest, there's not really any opportunities to have other lighting. So what I end up doing is getting these little glowy insects, these kind of glowy moths, like fireflies, and I put them around the forest, and I give it a bit of lighting. It makes the forest seem very welcoming. Now eventually I face the music and I start to work on the trees. I just turn them dark, and then I reduce the opacity, and you get a lovely shade effect. Yeah, the shade effect is great. You can see they're there, but it doesn't get in the way. And I think that brings us to the end of the video, so let's take a look at our final maps.
Hey, just a heads up, today's episode, it's got a smidge of what we call body horror to it. It's going to get a bit creepy, a bit spooky, maybe a bit messy. Nothing too crazy, hopefully, but I thought I should give you a fair warning beforehand. If that's not your thing, don't worry, you can still download the map with the link below absolutely for free. Well, it looks like the quest has come to our players this episode, gang, and for inspiration, I usually look through the monster manual and all my D&D books, and I found something interesting. I wasn't getting inspired. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition actually doesn't have that many plant-based opponents. And the ones they do have, well, I find they come in two categories. Category 1, imagine if a tree was really angry and it could walk towards you. Or Category 2, imagine if a bush was really angry and could walk towards you. So these monsters are fine. There's nothing really wrong with them, but I don't think they're going to wow our players. So for this episode, I've created our very own homebrew monster. I call it the Snatching Sprout. And spoiler warning, it's a bit of a creep. Ooh. Let's check it out.
The Snatching Sprout is a plant monstrosity. It starts as a tiny little flower inside a dank cave. Over time, it will develop into something much larger and very hungry. To put it simply, it's kind of like the Sarlacc from Star Wars, but a big plant. So this monster starts as a huge bulb underground that develops into a large chamber. This chamber is actually
What I call the stomach pit.
It has an opening at the top, and the sprout can spawn up to 4 large tendrils that can emerge from the ground around the pit, and these tendrils by themselves can grab a medium humanoid and pull them 40 feet on their turn towards the pit. The sprout usually feeds at night and uses tremor sense for up to 100 feet away to figure out where large animals and people are resting. It waits for them to stop moving, and then it sends its tendrils to grapple their prey. Once that happens, it drags the prey into its stomach chamber and starts hitting them with digestive acids and mini tendrils that come out and bite them. This is not only how it feeds, but how it also creates minions to protect itself. Once the prey has been mostly digested, the mini tendrils transform what's left of our poor victim into a scary undead plant monster man thing. Like the spooky ivies from Resident Evil 2 Remake, these sprouted, we'll call them, hide in the nearby area and make sure the snatching sprout can feed without being disturbed.
So there's the concept for our new monster. Now, when do we want to actually throw this encounter at the players? Well, when you're balancing this, Dungeon Masters, there's 2 things to consider. Number 1, your players are going to be probably unarmed for this one, unless they really insist on sleeping in their armor and taking all the negatives that come with it. And number 2, it's going to be at the end of the day, so our players, our PCs, they're not going to be at full strength anyway. They're not going to have all their abilities and spell slots, and they probably won't have all of their HP as well. So that's really serious. We could accidentally kill our players if we're not careful. So if you want this to be a fair challenge, then I would give this encounter to a team who've had a light day of adventuring. Not many encounters, they've not had to burn through their resources, they're pretty much at full strength. So if you do throw this encounter at the players when they're a little bit weaker, just make sure you commit to it, because I think the way this is going to pan out with the mechanics, yeah, it's going to be pretty dangerous. But I'll let you be the judge of that, and of course, feel free to change whatever you want from this encounter and make the snatching sprout your own.
The encounter begins at the edge of our hero's camp with the tendrils silently sneaking up. Did your players leave anyone on guard? If they haven't bothered to come up with a rota of night shift sentries, this is where they will get seriously punished. Because everyone who's guarding will get to roll perception against the sprout's tendrils' stealth, which is pretty high. If the guards do detect the tendrils, then they can call out and wake everyone up, to which you then roll initiative.
If they don't spot the tendrils, or they didn't set up a guard, well then the tendrils, they will automatically succeed on their grappling of these hapless adventurers. I would suggest, however, always leaving one hero ungrappled to give the players a little bit of agency in this, otherwise they're all just in the trap to start with, and that seems a bit mean. Maybe that's what you want though. Maybe you want it to be mean. You do you.
This counts as a surprise round for the Sprout and its little wigglies. Its whole shtick is this ambush attack, so it has a high initiative naturally. On the Sprout's turn, all the tendrils move, and with their grappled victims, they move 40 feet towards the stomach pit, dragging the PCs along the way. In regards to our map and positioning, this will give our PCs 1 turn to react. When it gets to their initiative, they can use their action to try and break out of the grapple. If they succeed, then they're free, and can join the fight against the monster. If they don't succeed, then they remain grappled, and on the Sprout's next turn, the tendrils will continue to drag our heroes straight to the disgusting maw of the stomach pit, ready to digest them. So the tendrils will detach the grapple and drop them in, and then they'll move to engage the other 3 PCs if there's any left. At the beginning of the Sprout's turn, anyone inside the stomach pit will take acid and piercing damage. They can attempt to climb out, but because of the goop on the walls, it will be an athletics check with disadvantage. Your players in their desperation might attack the walls of the stomach pit. They might do damage to it, but what they'll find is it's actually incredibly hardy and possesses regenerative powers. Any damage they do immediately heals before their very eyes. If your PCs do an attack on the stomach pit and it's a lot of damage, then I'd probably be fair and say, okay, that damage doesn't last. You're not actually hurting the monster, but it does regurgitate you. It has a bit of an upset tummy, and it throws you back up into the cave. The PCs who weren't grabbed will probably want to help the grappled heroes quickly. But remember, inside these bushes, we will have the horrible remains of the Snatcher Sprout's previous victims, the Sprouted. They start hidden in the bushes, and if a PC walks within 5 feet, they reveal themselves and immediately attack.
How do I kill this thing?
I would say at least have 2 hidden out here somewhere, but play it by ear.
What the hell is going on?
If 3 to 4 PCs are in the stomach, maybe have the Sprouted reveal themselves a bit later in the fight, once the PCs have started to manage to actually get out of the pit. If things are going well for the players, then you can add more and have them all arise from the bushes like a leafy army of the damned.
What the hell? Get off of me!
You know, really, as I work through this and think about this is less of a fight, less of a battle, more like a really goopy trap. A goopy trap. So how on earth do our players actually win against this encounter? Well, the Snatching Sprout has a weakness. We need to find the Brain Flower.
Well, they're going to need to kill that Snatching Sprout's brain flower. There's a few ways we can make this happen. It's well hidden in its dark cave. So any PC in that cave with a passive perception of 20 plus, well, they'll spot the brain flower on the ceiling. If they have dark vision, if someone illuminates the room, then that passive perception, well, you only need to have 16 plus to spot it. Another way we can get to finding this is if one of your players asks if they know what this monster is. Well, I'd prompt them with a bonus action to do a nature check, and if they succeed, they remember the weakness that is the brain flower, so they know it's around here somewhere. And if at any point someone simply says, "Is there anything on the ceiling?" well, they just spot it without needing a roll. They've done the hard work. It's there, it's there.
Once spotted, a few ranged attacks should be enough to destroy the Brain Flower. And with the Brain Flower's dead, so are all of its minions that it controls on its turn. But that's not it for the danger. The next 5 rounds, well, it's acid reflex. But digesting people in the stomach pit, well, that will continue. So you get 5 rounds of more acid damage done. We'll stop the piercing damage because the little tendrils just die without the brain flower. But that means at the end, the danger isn't quite resolved. If there's anyone left in the pit, now it's a scramble just to get them out before they get gooped.
So we've got our monster, we know what its plan of attack is, and we know how the players can beat it. I've also made some homebrew stat blocks for the monster and its minions. You can download them for free right down below.
So I've thrown a lot of stuff at you this episode. As usual, take what you like, change what you don't, and have fun at your tables. And so that's it for this week's episode of Quest Bonanza. Tune in next week for who knows what. As always, I'm Mike the Mapmaker. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider checking out my other series, It's Business Crime, where I make maps and I look at encounters from a criminal aspect. The idea of getting your players to do crimes in your Dungeons & Dragons world. Otherwise, keep on trucking. I'll see you next time.